Hello and welcome to the latest episode of MPP Insider, your source for all the latest news in the marijuana policy reform movement. I'm Mike Meno, and for this week's show, I'm joined by one of our all-star legislative analysts, Dan Riffle. Dan, how you doing?
Doing quite well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the Insider.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So a few quick headlines before we get to the heart of this episode. We wanted to update everybody on our ongoing Wal-Mart boycott. This was in reaction, as Dan, you know, to the firing of a medical marijuana patient in Michigan who was following his doctor's recommendation, who was a sinus cancer survivor, who had an inoperable brain tumor, but Wal-Mart decided that he needed to be fired because he was using a legitimate medicine that his doctor recommended. We asked MPP's audience to protest this and to contact Wal-Mart directly, and you guys did a great job. We got almost 6,000 people to write emails to Walmart's CEO through our website. You know, we've already seen a little bit of a change. They've no longer tell us about it.
They initially were, not only did they fire this guy, who by the way was, I think, Associate of the Year. We've blogged about this, so I know a lot of you have read about it, but they fired him and they contested his unemployment benefits. But thanks in large part to the messages that you folks have sent in, Walmart has reversed that decision, and they're now not contesting his unemployment benefits, which is very big, obviously. If you've read about Mr. Casillas, he's living in Michigan, one of the hardest hit states in this economy. Well over 10% unemployment there. Walmart's really the only employer in the region, so he's struggling now. So that's very, very big news that they're no longer contesting his unemployment benefits.
Just a really tragic story, and Walmart's still in the wrong. The other big news last week was out of California, as many of you might have heard. Californians this November will be able to vote on whether or not to end marijuana prohibition entirely. The TaxCannibas 2010 initiative secured enough signatures to get on the ballot. This is a big deal. You have the most populous state in the union now being able to vote on whether or not to end marijuana prohibition. It was only 14 years ago California became the first state to pass a medical marijuana law. So this is something big that we get to look forward to, and is going to help the debate a lot, I think.
Yeah, it's obviously very, very big news. And win or lose, it's going to be a close vote, but win or lose, it's really exciting that we're going to push this conversation into the mainstream now.
Exactly.
And really start to look at some serious policy changes.
All right, so one of the main reasons we wanted Dan on for this episode was Dan is our legislative analyst in charge of the District of Columbia, where they're now trying to figure out what the district's medical marijuana law that is finally getting implemented this year is going to look like. So Dan, what's the latest on this?
So yesterday, the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, along with the Health Committee in D.C., had a committee markup over some new legislation. If you've been following the situation in D.C., obviously the Barr Amendment was removed, and the Initiative 59 was transmitted to Congress. D.C. came out with some legislation back in February. There was a hearing. Lots and lots of patients and activists showed up to say, we're happy that you're moving forward with implementation, but there's some serious issues with this legislation. The new legislation that came out yesterday addresses some of those problems. Originally there was a 1,000-foot halo around schools, which in a place as dense as D.C. is really just not workable.
Where are you going to put dispensaries?
Exactly. You'd have to build a pier in the Potomac.
Do it off the harbor or something. Yeah.
So that was reduced to 300 feet, which is obviously a much better solution. The limitation that recommendations could only come from primary care physicians was removed. There are still some issues in the new legislation. For example, patients are only allowed to use marijuana or even paraphernalia obtained from dispensaries, so they can't use any paraphernalia that they have now, which doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense.
And how would they even keep track of that if it's a marijuana or paraphernalia that comes from it?
There's some sort of certification sticker that's going to go on every vaporizer that's sold. I don't know how it's really not workable.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a requirement that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's a couple other issues in the legislation that we're hoping to work through. For instance, patients are only allowed to use marijuana in their own homes or in a medical facility, which is a start. But I understand that maybe council needs to prohibit use in public places, but there's really no reason to exclude use in a friend's home or a caregiver's home, or really any private residence where the owner consents.
If they're away from the day and still need to take their medicine.
Exactly.
All right. Another state I wanted to check in on is Maryland, where we have ongoing medical marijuana legislation that is being looked at. What's the latest there?
So if you've been following there, you know we've got two bills, one in the House and one in the Senate. The House bill, which was written by Delegate Dan Morheim, who's a physician and has 47 bipartisan co-sponsors, which is really just unbelievable. Somehow is still managing to stall, thanks in large part to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee there, Joe Valerio. There's a work group in the House, and Chairman Valerio has appointed a number of legislators who are opposed to the bill, and so they're sort of gumming up the works in the House. But the good news is, we have companion legislation in the Senate, which was introduced by David Brinkley, a two-time cancer survivor.
And a Republican.
And a Republican, yeah. Also a bipartisan bill. It's incredible, really. It's sponsored by the President of the Senate, the Minority Leader, the Deputy Majority Leader, and I believe the Minority Whip as well.
Wow.
So almost the entire Senate leadership on this, both Republican and Democrat, is signed on. And that legislation is moving forward. We're expecting a vote any day now in the Judicial Proceedings Committee in the Senate.
So something else to look forward to. Another state to look forward to is New York, which for many years, MPP, patients, doctors, and other allied organizations there have been trying to pass a medical marijuana law in New York.
7 years we've been lobbying there.
7 years, yeah. So this is a long time coming. The latest development is that medical marijuana is now included in a budget proposal approved by the Senate. So this might be another way to get this law passed and to give patients in New York the protection and the care that they need.
Yeah, the Senate's been the tough nut to crack in New York. We've gotten the bill through the Assembly twice there, but the Senate, like I said, has been sort of a tough nut. But Noah Mamber, who's our legislative analyst there, has been doing a fantastic job. We've gotten through two committees now in the Senate, both times in bipartisan votes. So this is, the most progress we've seen through the Senate, and as you said, they've included in their budget proposal for the next year. So we're really hopeful that we can get that bill through sometime in the next couple of months.
And
I should also say a big shout out to New York Patients First, which is the grassroots group there in New York that's been helping us.
Well said. And it's worth pointing out that we're only highlighting a few states here, but there are more than a dozen states currently that have medical marijuana legislation that's being considered in one form or another. So, hopefully by the end of 2010, we can add to that list of 14 states that protect patients and give them safe access. One more thing we wanted to get in this episode is an ongoing development out west in Colorado and New Mexico over veterans' PTSD and whether or not they can be recommended medical marijuana for their PTSD.
Yeah, so in New Mexico, they have a provision in their legislation, which is really great, and we've tried to put that in other legislation. The health department is allowed to review petitions to add new qualifying conditions. Recently, they approved PTSD as a qualifying condition, which for the most part is in large part taken advantage of by veterans who are returning from Iraq or Afghanistan and have a lot of stress issues.
And we should point out that studies have shown 20% of veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. So.
Yeah, and if it weren't for marijuana, which is effective medicine, I know that a lot of those patients or a lot of those returning veterans get reliant on alcohol or other even harder substances. So.
And we've blogged about this in some specific stories. So if you want to read more, blog.mpp.org, check it out there.
Yeah. So. We're really trying to push Colorado to adopt this. We're actually also talking with the federal government. Aaron Houston, our federal lobbyist, has a FOIA request in with the federal government so that we can understand why the Veterans Affairs Department continues to, have such an unsympathetic stance towards these soldiers who have served our country.
To not only not recommend medical marijuana, but then to maybe punish soldiers who would be using it with a doctor's recommendation in a state like New Mexico and then test positive and potentially lose veterans benefits. It's
unconscionable.
It's simply not fair. So that's one more issue to look forward to. I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of MPP Insider. I want to thank Dan again for coming on and remind everyone to check our website, mpp.org, for updates. Check out the blog, blog.mpp.org, and our YouTube channel where you can watch these and previous MPP Insiders. So for the MPP Insider, I'm Mike Meno. This week,
Dan Riffle.
Dan Riffle. And thanks for watching.